Although it's true that you had to use the mouse to click on a button, the event in question was really a button event. We're going to look at actual mouse events now, which are different. A mouse event is something that's associated directly with things you do with the mouse, such as press and release keys, or move the mouse around, or drag an object around with the mouse on a node or a scene. Every node and scene in JavaFX has the ability to fire a mouse event. These events are captured by something called the mouse event object. This object has methods that allow us to check for things like the X and Y coordinates of the mouse or which button was pressed. One of the simplest things to talk about in terms of mouse events is to determine which button was pushed on the mouse. Although not all mice have a middle button, they certainly all have a primary and secondary button. Generally, the primary button is the left mouse button. That's the one you click most of the time for most of the things you do. The secondary button is the right mouse button. And if the mouse happens to have a middle button, then that will be another possibility in terms of mouse events. The constants that you see in the top part of this slide, primary, secondary, middle, and none, refer to buttons, and they can be queried using an appropriate method, specifically the getButton method. So when you use the getButton method, it will return one of those 4 different values. You can then use an appropriate Boolean statement such as getButton equals mouse button dot secondary to determine whether or not the secondary button, for example, was the one that was pressed. We have here a UML diagram for the mouse event class. The method at the top we've already talked about, that is the getButton method. I'll leave it for you to go through this complete UML diagram, but one thing I'd like to point out specifically is that there's a distinction between the XY coordinates of the mouse in the scene versus the XY coordinates of the mouse within the actual node that it's on. So we have separate methods to determine these values: getX, getY, and getSceneX and getSceneY. Notice also that you can hold down a key while you're clicking, and you can actually check to see if that key was held down. So the Alt key, the Control key, the Shift key, and there's also a meta button in the event that it applies.